Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May that one fill us with energy in all our activities. May that enlighten and illumine and lend its energy to our studies. May we not cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So, last week we almost started off really in a kind of introduction to the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. This is a very important chapter. Actually, it is the only opportunity we have to really appreciate this Gita as a combination, a very rare combination of spiritual practice using heart and hand, but also now head. So it's important to understand from an intellectual point of view all the principles behind the practice and all the experience that is gathered here in terms of investigation, logic, and in terms of a philosophy that at the same time is practical and addresses hand, heart, and head. So this is the 13th chapter, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. That is the yoga of the discrimination, the differences between what is called the field and the knower of the field. We have to understand, of course, this whole of the Bhagavad Gita is in the framework of the Mahabharata and is in the context, in this particular section, of a war. There are some critics who say this Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata and so on, they're all encouraging violence. But of course, we know that's not true. What it's doing is it's encouraging you to pick up the duty that is there in front of you and work in your field of activity. So it's very interesting to see that when we say field, we're looking at an area of endeavor. In science, when we talk about the Higgs field, we're talking about a kind of frequency or a kind of area, all-permitting area, where something exists in its own way. So everything really has a field to it. The electromagnetic field is the one we are most familiar with. It permits light, it permits heat. It's like a broadcasting system that broadcasts everywhere. And we have the equipment to tune in to it at any given moment, at any given location, given the range. It's not that we go to the BBC or whatever and get a separate broadcast for us. It's always there. It's in an all-permitting area and spanning all the wave systems that we can think of at different frequencies. Given space, it's found everywhere. Given time, we can catch it at any moment. So the field is where we engage in all our activities dedicated to us. And with any agricultural field, for example, there's a question of sowing and reaping. What we sow is what we reap. So there's a field of endeavor which encompasses some kind of limited area, and in contrast to that, there is some entity that knows the field, a knower of it, understanding that all experience is divided into two aspects: the thing that is seen and the seer, the object and the subject. Science's job is to investigate all the objective world. But if there's a materialistic philosophy, that is, if there's an understanding that this world is all that there exists, then we have some difficult problems. I think last week I may have mentioned the great neuroscientist philosopher who asks this question or states this. Consciousness is the hard problem, he says. Hard problem, why? Because we can't find it, we won't even address any subjective element of it. We have to look for an objective solution. And if consciousness is an object, the next question is a very simple question. Who knows it? Who is the knower, or what is the knower of this experience? in whatever way you put it, it is followed by this question, who knows it? Descartes, the great French philosopher, was famous for his cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. It starts off with, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. A slight difficulty there though, because the subjective has been ignored. It's not that I doubt and therefore I think and therefore I am. No. I am, therefore I think, therefore I doubt. It's the wrong way around, you see. I am, therefore I think, therefore I doubt. So what is this existent entity that remains stable in the midst of all these other things that change? What is that thing that doesn't evolve, but notices all the evolutionary changes? And so the scope of this changing evolution is what we call the field. And so the field is all the objective experience of the world that we know of, ranging from the most subtle things that we cannot see, cannot detect, to the familiar detectable world that we detect for a moment in its limited way, given space and time. It is an inert thing. They're like a spider with a web. If you approach the spider, it'll run to a corner of the web. If you poke the web itself, it just bounces back. It doesn't do anything. It's completely inert, insentient. What makes this web vibrate is the activity of the spider. And the web itself, and this is an example, of course, from the Upanishads, is not an independent entity because there is a spider, and I've said many times before, it didn't require a Mrs. Spider to make the web. It made it from itself. This universe, therefore, from itself, comes from this knower in conjunction with this known, the field, and the process is knowledge. These three things are intrinsic to this chapter, that there is a knower, there is a knowledge or process of knowledge as well, and then there is the known. The known is the field. The knower is the knower of the field. And the in-between, that is the connecting thing, is knowledge itself. If we don't have any one of these elements, then we have no knowledge. We don't know anything. And then there are these different aspects to it. Well, science's job is to explore the things which are objectively known, and we speculate are unknown but fall within the observable field. But there is no question what is the observer. And yet in modern science, the observer has become a critical element. We know, for example, at the smallest of worlds, the subatomic level and the quantum level, we know that there is an observer effect. There is a debate whether it is conscious observer effect, because there is a preceding paradigm that people have. And yet, how can an observer not be conscious? And so we cannot really get away from it. This observer is subjectively consciousness itself. So all these things are being discussed, and we have two things now emerging. One is Prakriti, nature, which constitutes the field, and Purusha, which constitutes the knower of the field. We are inclined to think that there is, every individual is a knower of their own field. This misunderstanding is corrected in this chapter, a very famous passage. So we begin then by finding out the constitution of these two elements, the thing that is seen and the seer, what is called Prakriti and Purusha, that really constitute everything. If you only have the field, you only have part of it. If you have only the knower, then you have only that aspect of it. Or the whole thing constitutes knowledge, true knowledge. So the first stanza begins with a question that we all ask. And of course we have to mention that certain scholars, Shankaracharya for example, will see this first stanza as not part of the original, an interpolation, and that is why in some of your copies you may find this is described as a 0. And then the real number 1 stanza comes actually as a second stanza. But it makes no difference. It doesn't add or take away anything. And so this is a question that all of us can ask. But Arjuna is perfect as asking it. So therefore Arjuna uvacha. Prakritim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetrajnam evacha itad veditam ichami jnanam nyeyam cha keshava. So this distinction is made. This prakriti is something that is unrefined and rough. And purusha, in the language of the yogis, also termed kshetra and kshetrajna, the field and the knower of this field. And then the jna, the knowledge itself, knowledge and that which ought to be known. These, O Keshava, I desire to learn. The question, why should we desire to learn these things? Because we're looking for true knowledge. And you can't have one without the other because that constitutes a headache. Consciousness is the hard problem, so they say. But what makes it hard? You're trying to fit it into an objective box, and it doesn't fit. And the question of investigating the subjective consciousness is not within the scope of external investigation. You can't put this knower into a test tube and see whether it's acid or alkaline. The knower can never be known in the objective sense. The seer can never be seen. And so what constitutes this knower is a witness, thinker, knower in one. We hear the description in the Upanishads of this Sat Chit Ananda. This Ananda means a witness. A witnessing entity is there. You get full enjoyment when you watch a dramatic performance when you're not one of the players. When you're sitting in the audience, you paid for your ticket, you're sitting there comfortably in a nice chair, the lights are dimmed, the curtains open, you gasp with expectation, and then the performance comes on. Only your anxiety only comes when you're nervously sitting in the background thinking, how many people came to see me? I never performed before so many people. And it's even worse, of course, if you're on television, because somebody says, don't worry, stay calm, there's only 5 million people watching you. So the witness position is one of joy and calm and bliss. And then we have this chit. The chit is this thinker aspect. The thinker aspect behind all thinkings, the current of thought that arrives at our substation, available for our use. And the knower is that entity, see, that is existence itself, it knows. So let us find out what is the explanation. And so we actually begin formally with the first stanza. Anyhow, Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the Blessed Lord is saying, Idam shariram kunteya kshetram ityabit abhitiyate etad yo vetitam prahu kshetrajna iti tadvidaha. This shariram, this body constitutes the field. Let us think about that a little bit. You see, we can say this body, but how different is this body to any other body? And we've seen in various other places in this Bhagavad Gita how the whole universe constitutes the divine body. What is happening here on the local level is a signature of a scale-up version where we see the whole universe as operating. Let us bear in mind also this 11th chapter that we covered not so long ago, with the whole of the universe, with all its variations, with all its drama, constructive and destructive, is the whole body of this divine entity. And so this also constitutes the field. From an individual perspective, we think this is our field. But we don't normally think of it in this way. Our identification with the field, thinking that this body-mind complex is the knower, we make an error and struggle then between all the other so-called opposition players in our small sphere of experience. Thinking I am the body, this is how we proceed. So earlier I was telling about, you see, a transformational point in people's life when they get this inspiration from Eastern philosophy. Because, you see, the Abrahamic religions, so beautiful as they are, some of them may unfortunately stress the idea, I am the body with a soul. This may be good for kindergarten purposes, but as we grow into an adult, we soon realize the other way around is the truth. I am a soul with a body. This is the vast difference between the Western and Eastern way of thinking, and affects the way we deal with the life in front of us. But whether that's the philosophy or not, both East and West have this commonality. In practice, the identification, I am the body. So this is technically called egoism. But I'm not the field. I'm not the object. At my most authentic, I am the knower of the field. And so this body is called this kshetra. It's a field of endeavor. And like any other agricultural field, for example, we find the fruits of our endeavor in that field itself. And he who knows it is called this knower of the field by the wise people. Those who are not wise will say, I. It's I. But the literal meaning, of course, of kshetra is that which is protected from perishing. If we view this whole world as a kind of protected field, we now have the spiritual insight to say that if we have a devotional nature, Lord, you are the protector. The body of beings is called kshetra, the field, because it is safe from destruction to which it is prone. It's safe from destruction because it is a protected field. But of course, it doesn't break down into destruction, it simply transforms itself. We are told that anything that is comprised of parts will dissemble, but it will be transformed into something else. It won't disappear. There's a conservation law that keeps it intact and makes it come out in a different form. But of course, kshetra also means the field, and it becomes increasingly productive to the extent it is improved. We won't just dismiss it. And this is the great danger of some positions in philosophy. As soon as you introduce exclusivist language, you're in trouble. You haven't got the flexibility to understand the total truth. And so there are adherents, say, of a certain school of philosophy, let's say Advaita philosophy, that say, no, don't worry about the field. The field has to be dispensed with. Only that I am the knower. But of course, the knower is only relevant in that language if there's a field to know. Of course, if I stand alone in a position of self-knowledge, that's different. If I'm a witness, there has to be something to witness. When I get into a situation where nothing is to be witnessed, it's not fair to say I am the witness or the seer. So the fertility provides a scope for both, in agricultural contexts, both wheat or corn or whatever you're growing, and weeds as well. And with the agricultural product that is useful, thrives within the same environment as the weeds, and the weeds are less, it grows better and is of much more use. So we reap the fruits of good and bad activities. There's confusion about the word karma. All it means is sowing and reaping. We sow in the field and we reap in the field. Finished. There's nothing mysterious or spectacular about it. It's simply a causal law. Within the field runs on causation. a cause and effect. It's a deterministic field. And so, the body is therefore the dharma kshetra of the jivatman. Jiva means something that is living, something that's alive, a living self. And so, we might even interpret it in a sense as soul. So dharma kshetra, that is the field of our own balancing potential, our own potential to harmonize nature itself. There's an intelligent principle that not only resides in the body but also cognizes and governs it. Sages designate that concerning principle as kshetrajna, and Sri Ramakrishna has this to say. The human body may be compared to a pot. We don't take it like that. Only the pot belly we take. The mind, intellect, and the senses are parallel to the water, rice, and potato, put into that pot, placed on a hearth. Within a while, the pot gets heated and the water boils, and the rice and potato, they jump around, isn't it? The beautiful example, homely example, typical of Sri Ramakrishna. The contents then become too hot to be handled. This heat, however, belongs to the fire and not to the pot. We've mistaken it. What is the life principle that gives liveliness to this pot, this thing called a body? It's not the body itself, independently. Body itself we call a corpse. So the heat, however, belongs to the fire, not to the pot and its contents. In this same way, similarly, it is the Shakti of Brahman, it is the energetic aspect of this one entity that enlivens the body, mind, intellect, and senses. Don't think for a moment that you have anything to do with it. It is the spider in a web that makes the web shake. And the spider is a sentient element. But you can poke the web as much as you like. It will never shout at you. It won't attack you. It won't run away from you. A web is a web. So, how many of these fields are there? So here in front of me, we find so many fields are here. This is our so-called normal stance. We think of each person as an individual. But Lord Krishna dispels this myth. So how many? Are there countless fields? Are there countless knowers of the field in the whole universe? Are they linked in any way? These are questions that can be asked. And so, kshetrajna chapi mam vidi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yatta jnanam vatam mama. The knower of the field, kshetrajnam. Cha, and api also, this knowledge, vidi, is deemed by me as true knowledge. Knowledge of the one aspect is incomplete. Knowledge of the other aspect is incomplete. Knowledge, the knower, and the known, this all constitutes one true knowledge. So Prakriti and Purusha, they are called respectively these two things, the non-self and the self. We can put it like this. And we know that the knower of the field is sentient, the field itself is insentient, and the Purusha identifies itself with the nature. This is our difficulty. So when we are talking of the subject of this, that is the discrimination or distinction between Kshetra and Kshetrajna, this is the title of our chapter, then we understand it's a process of separating these two things. As soon as we separate these two things, we get out of trouble. So it's like a color of a flower which seems transposed to a crystal kept near it, but it only reflects the color, that's all. And that Purusha is called Jivatman, who identifies himself with the nature that he handles. It has to be like that, by the way, otherwise the whole drama in nature does not work. We have to have this misunderstanding, and that is why the people who have this misunderstanding are not called wise. In fact, you can even call them fools. I'm not saying you're all fools. I'm saying there's hope for you. The differentiation in Prakriti is infinite. For this reason, the Jivatmans are also infinite. This is one thing, but the cosmic intelligence behind it all is only one thing. This we call the personal God. Also, we call it Ishvara. And while he appears, this word appears comes in philosophy now, to be imbued with the characteristics of nature. He is actually untouched by it. He is the innermost self in all beings, And we'll come across this now in this next stanza. So jnana or knowledge is the true understanding of both of these two things. We covered that. And is also commensurate with the Upanishads, which distinguish between Paravidya and Aparavidya, higher knowledge and lower knowledge. And to be well versed and versatile in the Vedas, the Agamas, grammar, rhetoric, and branches of science and arts according to the Mundaka Upanishad, all these come under the lower knowledge, we're told. But the higher knowledge is this Brahman jnana, this knowledge of Brahman, or self-knowledge, or supreme knowledge. So there's a Puranic story anyway that illustrates this point. Ganesha and Kartikeya are the sons of the Lord Shiva. I think we're all familiar with Ganesha, see? And then Kartikeya is his brother, his more dynamic brother. And so it was put once to these valiant sons that whoever returned first after surveying the entire existence would get as prize a celestial fruit brought by the sage Narada. So no sooner was this announcement made, Kartikeya, who was clearly a number 3, dashed off to make this achievement and cover the entire existence. But the more plump and more leisurely Ganesha, he pondered over the terms imposed, his pot belly and head symbolizing an element of wisdom, and so he came to a different conclusion. He slowly but surely, on his tiny vehicle of a mouse, quite comical to see this elephant-like figure on a mouse. If you go to this Ganesha park, you'll see some interesting contrasts of that. He circumambulated his father and mother and claimed the prize because that was all that was necessary to go and cover the entire existence. But of course, within a while, the younger brother came back, successfully terminating his expeditions, and both of them, of course, were true. Both the brothers were wise in their own way. Kartikeya inquired into the manifest Prakriti, Ganesha into the unmanifest Purusha. A harmonious combination of these two inquiries really constitutes true knowledge. Knowing the one to the exclusion of the other is imperfect. And so we mentioned previously that scientific inquiry made by the modern scientific person searches after the Prakriti and is represented by the younger brother Kartikeya, investigating that side. It has taken him very near this Purusha, very near the whole level of existence in its subtlety. But as Kartikeya's survey terminated in his coming back to the divine, how can we approach? We can start off from a scientific inquiry that investigates this universe and come to an astonishing conclusion that modern science is nearing, coming away from materialism, understanding that this field is nothing but a temporary location, that there are no permanent habitats in this entire universe, and coming to a conclusion that it is in fact ephemeral. It is a kind of mirage. It is a kind of apparitional existence, not to be taken as actual. This is the conclusion of modern science. Modern science from 1905 onwards has told us that the total space-time separation between the two events goes to 0. there is an enormous event that has gone on about 300 million years ago, 300 million light years ago. But it appears as if it were 300 million years ago, or as happening now. And what is it? It is a massive explosion comparable to the alleged Big Bang. Alleged Big Bang because many people think there's no real proof or evidence for it, that the evidence may not be reliable. But anyway, assuming that it is so, this huge explosion took place, massive, not seen ever before. But it's appearing as if it's happening now. See the illusion of it. And then when we say the whole of matter can be resolved into energy, its most subtle component. The only thing that makes something heavy is energy. And this energy has a huge nuclear capacity. It is more powerful than we can think. And yet, the energy and the matter and the mass or the energy and its potential variations actually neutralize and go to zero. Nothing is there. Time is not there, space is not there, and now matter and energy have also gone. It's not that there's nothing there, but what is there is the existent entity that always was there, the thing that was infinite, unchanging and undivided, standing there. Before this earth came into existence, the earth, the planet that we live on, what was there? So there's a beautiful example from the Upanishads, and you can put it in this language. Before this earth was, some entity was there and wove a body of earth around itself and entered into it as its inner controller. This is Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Entered into it, occupied it. If our poetic mind can think of this, we revalue this whole earth completely. When people say, you know, what about the earth? I got a question when I was in France, you see, about a certain technique, thinking that there is no philosophy, only practice of an obscure type. The question was, what do I think of a practice of sitting and getting energy from the magnetic earth, that kind of thing, and then expressing it and all kinds of things. Before he could finish, I said, well, you see, actually the earth's magnetism is because the internal entity called Brahman sits there and weaves an earth around itself and then occupies it. Why don't you think of that? Sri Ramakrishna puts it like this: one is not termed as rich by one's merely owning money. There are signs of one's being rich. His house would be well lit in all the rooms, whereas a poor man cannot afford to have many lights. The human body is the tabernacle or tent or the receptacle of the Lord. It should not be kept in the darkness of ignorance. It should be lit with the lamp of wisdom. When you illumine your heart with this lamp, you will behold the benign Lord there. A beautiful statement. Jnana, knowledge, can be gained by one and all, not just by select people or only in a post-mortem condition. There are in the human temple two entities, the little Jivatman and the great Paramatman. The former is dependent on the latter. And as the electricity from the same source illuminates all the houses, this Paramatman, this Supreme Self, gives light to all the little Jivatmans, all the little houses' lights. The divine knowledge illumines your body, yourself, and the Paramatman in you all at once. This is worthy of meditation. Don't think that you have your own life. Think that this is a housing lit from within by an eternal supply, like an electrical current. This divine grace flowing continuously and worthy of adoration and thankfulness. This is combining, therefore, the principle and the practice together. What a wonderful combination. Actually, this is the only scripture that you'll find with this combination. All the other scriptures in the world, they don't have this combination. But in this small text that we call Bhagavad Gita, which can be condensed if you see the size of your copies there, very small, and yet the most profound text combining not only science and information of this world, but also this subtle internal world, as it were, that never changes, the changeless. Now here's the most profound statement, and this is the last statement we'll take for tonight. Supposing you think that we all have this individuality, this is dispelled. Tat kshetram yach chadjatricha yadvikari yatat chayas sachayo yat prabhavat cha tat samasena me shranu. Here briefly from me, briefly, we don't have to go into any lengthy discourse about it. It's very brief. Find out, here I'm going to define what is this field. We broadly described it, now let's go into some detail. And what its properties are, what its modifications are, whence is what, and who is he, and what his powers are. And then to endorse its validity, this truth is sung by all the sages, all the wise people. And now before we end, I'm going to actually I'm going to go back and retrace our footsteps a little bit. And just remind you of this important text. So what we had said, by virtue of a story, I'm going to reinforce a little bit. Because know me, says Krishna, if you recall, as the knower in all the fields. There's only one entity. Re-emphasize that. Only one entity in all these fields. This unity of existence is stressed. If you want to ask in modern science how many energies are there, it'll have to be resolved only to one. How much matter is there? There is a matter, one entity. We can say hydrogen, if you will. And even that we can say subatomic particles and quantum field. One thing only. In any investigation, you want to look for the most generalized thing, the most subtle thing, the most causal thing. Only one entity. Only one entity in the field, only one entity as the knower. One universe, one knower in all the fields. Just to remind you of this important saying, this important text. Anyway, to describe the field itself, here we have to go into some understanding, we'll do it briefly, of the Sankhya system of categorization. Now if I had a whiteboard, I'd do it on the whiteboard, but those who are familiar with my talks, we'll just imagine the whiteboard. So what we start off with, don't forget, Sankhya gives us 24 different categories. We can add 2 more. We can add Jiva and we can add Paramatma or Purusha. So what are these categories? This is very helpful because in a previous talk, maybe even last week, I mentioned that if you take the Ashtavakra Samhita, it gives us a remarkable statement. It tells us, if we know that these common elements that we see in our day-to-day life are actually resolved back to the great elements, that is, the 5 great subtle elements of this universe, then immediately our ignorance goes and disappears. What a wonderful statement. So it's important to know what is the nature of this field. So let us try to understand, and I try to lead you through it in the meditation exercise also. And we can start from the bottom upwards. We can make a whole lump category of 16 items. These are the gross objects that are seen and observed and connected with by the sense organs. 10 sense organs are there, 5 organs of information, taking things in, and 5 organs of reaction. What are these 5? Eyes, ears, etc. All the senses are there, and they're all on the external aspect of the body. They're all on the skin. At the cellular level, they're all in the membrane. It's all in the outer part, getting information from the outside to the inside. You won't have an ear on the inside. The ear is clearly on the outside. And don't think that you look better with the nose on the other side of your head. You won't. It's just designed like that, all right? Then you have to, there's a mind. We can collectively call it a mind. So 5 senses, 5 organs of reaction. In any organism we find this action, reaction, efferent and afferent currents. And then the gross organs, the gross objects of these senses, making a total of 16. 16, mentally draw a line there. This is the crest of the wave of our existence. It is the minutest portion of existence itself. And then we find the subtle elements, 5 of them. We can translate them as, at its most subtle, as Agasha. Agasha, Vayu, Agni, and so on. But the Agasha is equated to space, equated to basic material substance in its potentiality. It is this energy, divine energy, impacting on this material that combines and produces all these other things. And so we find it equates to potential energy. Its energetic value will be potential energy. That combines into kinetic energy. We were describing earlier on how that works just with a pendulum. A pendulum, you raise the pendulum up there, you swing it. When it goes on the upswing, it's fine, it's poised there, it goes into inertia. After inertia, it goes into potential energy. Gravity takes hold of it, kinetic energy takes it up. Gravitational energy takes it down, it's transferred to kinetic energy, and then an inertial pause. So it goes on. Inertial energy being there, kinetic energy being there, and also potential energy being there. So this potential energy we call Akasha, uselessly, unfortunately, translated as something like ether. And as that combines and as the vibration changes, as it gets more exaggerated and yet still subtle, we call this Vayu, uselessly translated as air. And Akasha being the primordial field, as it were, of all the subtle vibrations. What happens is it comes out as all sounds and all ears that catch it, and Vayu, all pressures and all skins that catch it, and Agni, all radiance and all eyes that catch it, all shining things, and unfortunately translated water, all these fluidity things, all this magnetism. That means, see, all tastes, all mouths that catch them. And then ultimately we find all scents and smells and all detectors called noses that catch it. And then that gross variety comes here as this variety within creatures that we call nose and ears and all the rest of it, and an objective world. All these elements combine and recombine, constituting here, and this is all part of the field. All of this is part of the field. Does it end there? No. Where does it all come from? It comes from the cosmic intelligence. It comes from a cosmic mind. It comes from buddhi, divine buddhi, cosmic buddhi. And it is this that designs and orientates, and it's the reason why we have intelligence at the end. And religion calls this personal God. So that's a necessary component. Where does that come from? It comes from an equilibrium. It comes from infinite potential energy which is there. And this we call the formless God. Its prime movement is Om. And then we draw a line mentally, because all of this now constitutes the field. This we'll go into next week. What is the knower of the field? This aspect, transcendent, constituting another principle. And so the Sankhyas don't have that principle necessarily in their categorization. So far we went to 24 categories, but we can add 2 more. The Jiva, who taps into the Supreme. And the way of tapping into is either in a dualistic way of catching God's grace, like tapping into honey, desiring for separation, or a sense of connectedness, or ultimately one without a second. There are no 2. These are the 3 approaches. And for convenience sake, we add the numbers as Jiva 25, Purusha 26. So in a wonderful comprehensive way, these things are described by the Sankhya's and picked up in this text also, which we'll continue with next week. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace beyond.